In the last segment, we spoke about competitive landscape, defensibility, and differentiation. Essentially, understanding what makes you defensible and why AI makes that uniquely complex, and how to map out where you sit relative to your competitors. You now should know what differentiation looks like and why it has to be rooted in what your customer actually cares about. But here's the thing. When we say your customer, who exactly are we talking about? Because differentiation doesn't mean anything in the abstract. It only matters when it's pointed at a specific person with a specific problem in a specific context. One of the most common mistakes I see AI builders make is trying to serve everyone at once, trying to be everything to everyone at once. The pattern is typically you build something genuinely impressive, and the temptation is to go after the entire market because it could help a whole lot of people. And that instinct comes from a good place. But what tends to happen is that your message gets diluted, your product tries to do too many things, and nobody in the market quite feels like it was built for them. So this section is about getting clear on who your customer is, not the whole market, but the segment that matters the most right now. And I want to start with a story that has nothing to do with AI, but is one of the clearest examples of the power of customer segmentation that I've come across. Let's think about DoorDash, the food delivery company. When DoorDash launched in 2013, the food delivery market already had established players. Grubhub had about 70% market share. Uber Eats was scaling fast off of Uber's massive ride-sharing network. And both of them were laser focused on dense urban markets like Manhattan, San Francisco, and Chicago. Why? Because that's where the economics of the business seemed to make the most sense. Essentially, the thesis was high population density, lots of restaurants, and lots of people who don't like to cook. It made complete sense. DoorDash looked at that and made a completely different, counterintuitive decision. Instead of going head to head in cities, they targeted suburbs, smaller towns, areas where nobody was delivering. And at that time, people in the industry thought this was a strange move. Why are you targeting the suburbs, they said, where the orders are spread out, where the distances are longer, and where there's no existing infrastructure. But here's what DoorDash understood about the segment that nobody saw. Suburban families had a higher average order value. They had more disposable income and fewer delivery options. And the restaurants in those areas, the chain restaurants, the local delivery spots, had existing customer base but no delivery capability. So DoorDash just wasn't delivering food, they were unlocking an entire new channel for restaurants that had never had one before. The result? By 2019, DoorDash had overtaken both Grubhub and Uber Eats in the US market share. Currently, they hold roughly 67% of the US food delivery market. A former Uber executive later admitted, and I'm paraphrasing here, what we did wrong was that we massively underestimated the suburbs. The lesson here isn't about food delivery. It's about the power of segmentation. DoorDash didn't win by building a better product than Uber Eats. They won by choosing a superior customer. They found a segment that was underserved, had high willingness to pay, and where they could build density and dominance before anyone else showed up. You see, that's beachhead thinking, and it's something worth keeping in mind as you build your own product. So let's bring this into our world. When you're building an AI product, you're typically not launching to the entire market on day one. You are looking for a specific type of customer, that is, early adopters. But to understand why they matter, it helps to understand the full picture of how technology generally gets adopted. Geoffrey Moore, one of the greatest thinkers of this, wrote a book called Crossing the Chasm. It essentially breaks down your potential market into 5 groups. And I'm going to go through them and explain them one by one. The first is innovators. These tend to be technology enthusiasts who will try something because it's new. A very thin slice, but they will find you before you find them. Then you have early adopters. These are visionary customers who have a genuine problem, but they're willing to take a chance on something that isn't polished yet. They aren't just excited about the technology, they see strategic value in getting there before anyone else. And after that comes the early majority. These are pragmatic customers who want case studies, reference, and a product that feels complete before they commit. Then comes the late majority, who adopt something once it has become standard. And then finally, the laggards, who resist change until when they have absolutely no choice. The reason this matters is that there is a gap between the early adopters and the early majority. This is what Geoffrey Moore calls the chasm, and is where a lot of promising products stall out. Early adopters will often tolerate the rough edges and give you feedback because they invested in the vision. The early majority won't. They want something that just works. But whilst this is a fantastic framework, here's what's interesting about AI right now. The Geoffrey Moore framework has held true for decades across every major technology wave. But AI is bending some of these rules. There's a widely accepted sense across industry that this is a fundamental change and not just another software cycle. And because of that urgency, there is significant fear of missing out. And that is compressing the adoption curve in ways that we have never seen before. You've got early majority buyers, the pragmatists who typically wait for proof, moving faster than they typically would, because to them, the cost of waiting for something to be proven feels higher than the cost of experimenting. That's a big reason why you are seeing AI companies hit growth rates that we thought were unthinkable even 5 years ago. But that doesn't mean you can skip the work of choosing your segment. If anything, it means more people are raising their hands, which makes it more important to be intentional about who you choose first. There's a great framework for doing this that I'm going to talk about. It simply focuses on segmenting the market, finding the segment of that market that best fits with your value proposition, and using a beachhead strategy to expand from here. In most instances, the rule of thumb that I will give to you, regardless of the context, is lean towards the customer that gives you the fastest feedback in the shortest sales cycle. Now, I want you to remember this. This is not a hard and fast rule because there are exceptions. But more often than not, the filter that I gave to you earlier serves you the best. Because even with the most compressed adoption cycle, the speed of your learning matters enormously. If your first customer takes 9 months to close and 6 months to implement, that's over a year where you're not learning very much. But if someone can say yes in 2 weeks and start using the product from day one, you've got a dozen iteration cycle in that year. The difference between those who are widely successful and those who are not so widely successful is often what separates a product that finds fit from day one or the other that runs out of time before it gets there. The question is not just who has the biggest budget, but who I can learn from the fastest. I'm going to introduce a new concept called jobs to be done. Now you've started thinking about early adopters and what the speed of feedback looks like. The next question to think about is, what job are you actually solving for them? Because this is where things get even more interesting. And because a lot of AI builders naturally segment by industry or company size, when the better lens to think about is often the job that your customer needs done. That is the specific challenge that your customer is trying to address with the solution. Let me give you an example from the legal AI space that I think illustrates this beautifully. Harvey and EvenUp are both AI companies serving lawyers. They are focusing on the same industry and same broad category. They're completely different businesses because they're targeting different jobs to be done. Harvey targeted elite law firms, i.e., the AM Law 100, the Magic Circles in London. These are organizations where a single M&A transaction might involve reviewing tens of thousands of documents. The jobs to be done here is making high stakes, high volume work faster and more precise for a large team of attorneys. They started with Allen and Overy in late 2022, got 3,500 lawyers using the platform for 40,000 queries during the pilot, and then expanded from here. Today, Harvey serves over 1,000 clients across 60 countries and has surpassed over 190 million in annual recurring revenue and is worth $8 billion. EvenUp looked at the same industry and a different job. They went after personal injury plaintiffs, often smaller firms with solo attorney, where the job to be done is drafting demand letters, reviewing medical records, and determining fair settlement values. These firms don't have armies of associates. They are running on contingency fees. They need AI to do the work that otherwise requires staff that they can't afford to hire. EvenUp now serves 2,000 firms, has $2 billion in valuation, and processes 10,000 cases per week. Same industry, completely different customers, completely different job, and completely different businesses. This is why jobs to be done tends to be a sharper lens than just demographic segmentation. If EvenUp and Harvey had just said, we serve lawyers, they would end up building something generic that didn't truly solve either problem well. Instead, each builds something extraordinary for a specific customer with a specific need in a specific context. The job your customer needs done can inform your product, inform your messaging, even your go-to-market strategies in ways that industry labels can't. Get the job to be done right, and the segmentation and everything downstream becomes easier. Now you understand early adopters, you understand jobs to be done. How do you actually evaluate and compare segments? This is where the segmentation becomes really useful. And there's a tested framework that I think is one of the most practical tools available. The idea is simple. You list all your potential segments as rows, and you score them across multiple dimensions that are relevant as columns. Not just do they need our product, but a much richer set of criteria. The best versions of these criteria evaluate segments on the following: market size and growth, fit with your value proposition, propensity to spend, market concentration, market access, and ease of selling. And what I like about this is it forces you to be honest about trade-off. And those honest conversations are where the best strategic thinking tends to happen. Now let's make this concrete. Imagine you're Harvey before you launched. You list all your segment as AM 100 law firms, mid-sized regional law firms, in-house corporate law teams, solo practitioner, government legal departments. And if you scroll these dimensions, AM low 100 firms start to stand out. Fit with your value proposition extremely high. They have a massive document review needs, propensity to spend very high. These firms bill at rates where saving a couple of hours is worth thousands. Market concentration extremely high. There are only a few hundred of them and they all talk to each other. Market access achievable. They tend to attend the same conference, read the same publication. Ease of selling, moderate, because enterprise sales cycles are real. But once you land one, the reference effect is enormous. Now let's compare that to solo practitioner. They might generally need AI, and many of them do, but their propensity to spend is lower. The market concentration is fragmented, and the economics of serving them one by one are tough to make work earlier on. Now, that's not a judgment call about their value as customers. It's just a way of thinking about where you can build momentum fastest. And you can always come back and serve that segment later once you built the foundation. It's important to know that the matrix doesn't automatically give you the answer. What it does give you is clarity. And clarity is what helps you avoid spreading yourself too thin, trying to chase every opportunity at once. I'd encourage you to build this matrix for your own product. Score all your segments honestly. Have your team debate this scores. The conversation itself is more valuable than the output because it surfaces assumptions that you didn't know that you were making. I want to zoom into one dimension that I think deserves its own spotlight. That is willingness to pay or propensity to pay. Here's why this matters so much right now. The cost of building AI is real. These are compute, model access, infrastructure, and in some cases, talent. And if you're targeting a segment that genuinely loves your product but is unable to pay enough to sustain your business, you might find yourself in a tough spot in the long term. You might have great traction, great feedback, but a difficult path to build a sustainable business in the long term. That's a fixable problem, but it's much easier to address that thinking from the start. One of the most instructive examples I can point to is the strategic divergence between OpenAI and Anthropic. These are companies that have access to the same comparable frontier technology, but they have made fundamentally different bets on which customers to serve, and those bets are rooted in different willingness to pay. OpenAI went consumer first. They currently have over 800 million weekly active users on ChatGPT. Massive scale, massive global reach. And increasingly, they are moving towards an advertising-based revenue model, launching consumer ads, building a distribution engine. And if that sounds similar, it should. They are essentially trying to run the Google or Meta playbook. Essentially, aggregate attention at scale and monetize it through ads. Anthropic is making the opposite bet. They are focusing on the enterprise and API first. This is why 62% of their revenue comes from the business use of the API. They have avoided ads entirely and doubled down on enterprise customers who pay a premium for integration, reliability, and safety. They currently hold 32% of the enterprise market share compared to OpenAI's 25%. They are running different playbook, essentially the Microsoft playbook. Their aim essentially is to reach the customer who would pay the most per seat and build deep, sticky relationships. Now, I want to be clear. Neither approach is wrong, but both are building massive and super successful businesses. But I want to be straightforward about the trade-offs because this often connects back to what we have spoken about earlier. The speed of feedback. The enterprise path, the Anthropic path, the Harvey path can be incredibly rewarding. The contract sizes are bigger, the relationships are stickier, and once you are embedded into someone's workflow, you are genuinely harder to replace. But enterprise sales cycles are long. Procurement is slow. Decision makers tend to be very risk averse. That combination has stalled more promising AI companies or more technology companies than almost anything else. The pattern is you build something brilliant, pitch it to a Fortune 500, and spend 8 months hearing, let's do another pilot, whilst you are burning runway and you're learning very little. Now let's bring it back to my personal practical advice. Regardless of your context, enterprises can be the right long-term play, and for some of you, it will be. But earlier on, especially when you're still trying to figure out market fit, I generally find that the most valuable thing you can do is to optimize for customers that will pay enough, provide you with fast feedback loop, and have the shortest sales cycle. Find a customer who can say yes quickly, use your product right away, and tell you what's working as fast as possible. You can always move up market once you've nailed the product and you have the evidence to back a much longer sales conversation with enterprises. Often, going the other direction, that is, starting from enterprise and trying to move that market, tends to be a much more harder thing to pull off. So the willingness to pay question isn't who will pay the most. It's worth asking who will pay enough, fast enough for me to keep learning and building. So let's pull this all together. You've got the early adopters, you've explored the job you're solving, you've scored your segments by metrics, you are even maybe pressured the willingness to pay. Now it's time to talk about your beachhead. The outcome of this should be your beachhead. Your beachhead is the single segment where you're going to focus your energy and win before you expand elsewhere. It's exactly what DoorDash did with the suburbs, what Harvey did with AM Law 100 firms, and what Even Up did with personal injury practice and what Even Up did with personal injury plaintiff practices. The criteria for a great beachhead tend to be fairly consistent. It's a segment where you can genuinely dominate and not just participate in. It should be concentrated enough that word of mouth can travel. You can genuinely reach decision makers without fighting through layers of gatekeepers. And critically, winning this segment gives you leverage to expand into adjacent segments over time. Remember, the beachhead isn't your home market. It's just your launch pad. DoorDash didn't stay in suburbs forever. They expanded into cities once they had the scale and the brand to compete. Harvey didn't just stay with top law firms. They're now expanding into in-house legal firms and professional services. Both started with a segment they could own, and that focus gave them the momentum to grow into everything else. Pick your segment, own it, and then expand from there. Now, here are the key takeaways. Number one, your early adopters are not your home market. They are the customers who will typically give you the fastest feedback and the shortest sales cycle. And finding them early is one of the highest leverage things that you can do. Number two, segment by the job your customer needs done, not just by the industry or the customer size. Remember the Even Up and Harvey example. Number three, build a segmentation matrix and score your potential segments across the 5 dimensions that matter to you, namely market size and growth, solution fit, willingness to pay or propensity to spend, market concentration, and ease of selling. 4. Focusing on willingness to pay is often a reality check. Make sure the segment you are targeting can pay enough, fast enough to sustain the business you are building. 5. Based off of this, choose a beachhead segment you can dominate before expanding. Remember, focus creates momentum and momentum creates optionality. Number 6, your beachhead is a launch pad, not a ceiling. The segment you start with gives you the leverage to expand into adjacent segment over time, but only if you win that initial segment first. If you can walk through this clearly, you are in great shape for what comes next. Now you have a way to think about who your customer is and how to choose them. In the next segment, we're going to talk about how to actually reach them. That is, developing scalable market entry techniques that turn your beachhead into a growth engine. Because knowing your beachhead is the foundation, but getting to them is where execution begins.